Best-selling author and American psychologist Mary Pfeiffer said this: "We live in a world filled with language. Language imparts identity, meaning, and perspective to our human community. Writers are either polluters or part of the cleanup team. Just as the language of power and greed has the potential to destroy us, the language of reason and empathy has the power to save us. Writers can inspire a kinder, fairer, more beautiful world, or invite selfishness, stereotyping, and violence. Writers can unite people or divide them." In this book show podcast, host, confidence coach Susan Axelrod asks women authors a simple question: which kind of writer are you? She invites each guest to step into the confidence zone to proclaim how her book can inspire. If you are seeking inspiration to create your legacy, take out your pen and pad. Your book, My Time, starts now. Hello, friends. Welcome to this episode of the KS Media Group Book Show, Your Book, My Time. I'm Susan Axelrod, the confidence coach, host of this podcast. Studies show, and I will post them, that your mind and your imagination can support your vision and real life. I'm bringing this up now because today's guest is a travel writer and travel photographer, and as she calls herself, a travel addict. And her book that we will discuss today can support your own desire to travel. So many people today have not traveled for a long time now due to the pandemic. And now we have travel prices and we have fear. And yet, if you want to travel, you can travel in your mind. Please believe me, this can support you. And I wonder if our guest would say, get out of your mind and get into the body of traveling. So I am delighted to welcome Karen Gershowitz to this podcast discussion today, author of Travel Mania, Stories of Wanderlust. Karen, hello. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Good morning. I heard you say that and I immediately went, oh, yes, that's exactly what I want people to do.
Yeah.
It's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in going through your website, getting familiar with your material, and also having last week traveled across the United States by car myself, I really know that there are many people who are still nervous about traveling. Now we're after a few years, we're out of the habit of traveling. And I do want to ask you, before I get into my three questions, I want to ask you, do you agree that if you think about, imagine, and visualize travel, it could spark that desire that you have?
Oh, absolutely. And the other piece of it is you don't have to travel far. People assume that they have to go to London or Paris or Tokyo. And the truth is, go explore in your neighborhood. I mean, I spent 2 years of COVID I live in New York City, exploring the area because I can't stay home. I mean, I'm fanatic about it. And start small. You know, it doesn't have to be this thing. People build it up to be terrifying, and it doesn't really need to be. In fact,
I love this. Of course, you know, I'm the confidence coach, and I know that confidence comes from taking small steps, right? Taking the action of the small steps. What you're helping us to understand here is that travel is a mindset. And when you say, I couldn't travel, but I made the choice to do it anyway, right in my own area. Of course, you live in the Big Apple. Okay, that's more exciting than where most of us live. But it sounds like you're talking about a lens.
Yes. Seeing the world a different way. It's what would someone who'd never been here before see? And if I go 25 miles in any direction, a direction I've never been in before, what am I going to discover?
Yeah.
never know. And it's opening yourself up to the possibility that something interesting will happen and that you'll see or experience something that you never experienced before.
Mm. So my tagline is imagine the possibilities. And so I love that you're talking about opening yourself to the possibility. In my travel across the country by car, also you see the billboards, right? In the different areas of the country, you're exposed to different things. But let me get to this important question. What is the story under your story of the book, Travel Mania?
Well, when I was very young, my family used to go on trips. And we took a trip up to Canada, and it was the first into Montreal. And it was the first time I had ever heard people speaking French, just speaking it.
Mm.
I think I was 6 years old. I was fascinated by it. So that was one piece of it. My mother always wanted to travel, and for very good reasons, never could. But we lived in New York City. I grew up in Manhattan. And so she took me to museums, and she took me to every cultural event there was and dances. I became fascinated by all of this, really fascinated. And I decided that I was going to see them where they originated. And this was when I was 10 or 12 years old.
Wow.
So really a long time. And when I was 16, I left home. It was a very bad time in New York City. It was just a time of chaos. And went to Europe, and I ended up staying there for 3 years on my own.
Wow.
I planned to do that, but I did. And it was, talk about a confidence builder. That was if I could do that, I could do anything. And came back to the States, but I always wanted to travel. And I talk about that I switched careers and I changed. I've done everything in order to support this habit. When I had no money, when I had no time, when I had no anything, I figured out a way to do it.
Oh, this is interesting. So first of all, what you just shared with us, even though I did not know that story of your mother, but what you just shared with us verifies and validates exactly what I said. You said your mother wanted to travel, but for good reasons she couldn't travel. So what did she do? She went to festivals and introduced you to culture and museums, and that then sparked and stoked your own desire from just seeing and imagining. So I love that so much. And then another thing I want to point out, Karen, is that you said, I did anything I needed to, you call it addiction, but, to feed it, to fuel it. I call it, in this case, passion, this deep passion that yielded an intuitive space for you. And so, so often today, that's not the case.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm going to do one other little piece of history here, which is I have a bachelor's and a master's of fine arts in ceramics. And I realized that was never going to support this particular passion. And so I switched careers. And shortly after that, I discovered that I became wildly allergic to all of the glaze materials. So I couldn't even go near anything.
Oh.
But I needed a creative outlet. And I started writing. And I had always journaled, and I had always done travel journals. And I just started taking writing classes, but I was always writing about traveling. But not traveling as in go to this restaurant or go see this place, but travel stories. And everybody loved them, really loved them. And I started getting some of them published. But I was busy working and didn't even think about doing a book until I was in a writing group, and the other people in the group said, you must get these published. You must. And I finally, as I was getting towards the point that I was going to retire, said, okay, it's time, and put it together and actually found a publisher and got the book published. But it was really because I had a lot of people behind me saying, you must do this.
I love this. So that's what I call motivation from inspiration. So you wrote something that they felt inspired by, right?
Yes.
And then you were motivated into action.
Yes.
So I love that. So there's so much to this little piece now too. First of all, you wrote. I'm obviously a writer. I'm a 3 times published author. I work with people. I call myself a book Sherpa coach to pull out and pull together like all those writings that you had. I work with people in that way. So I'm always encouraging people, and especially young people, to write. You said you wrote from a young time. And then later you joined a writing group. I have an accountability group. And so all of these things I can verify at my end of the conversation are actual strategies that lead toward the thing that you want. And that was to travel. So tell us, you spent 3 years living in Europe as a teenager, basically, and then you came back here, and then you said you worked. And so one question I have there is, how did you do your travel while you were also working with those life stage responsibilities?
Well, I was very gutsy, and I only say this in retrospect because I didn't think of it at the time as being particularly gutsy. One of my jobs, I got standard 2 weeks vacation, and I said, I want to go to Alaska. I'm not going to Alaska for 2 weeks. That's crazy. I'm going for a month. And I essentially told my bosses I was taking a month to go to Alaska, and they said, you can't. And I said, oh, watch me. And here's the book, and it says I can take 2 weeks unpaid vacation. That's what I'm doing. And I'm giving you a lot of advance warning, and they couldn't figure out how to say no. So I went. And when I got back, the interesting piece of all of this was that they couldn't figure out how not to pay me for the 2 weeks, so I got paid for the whole time. But more importantly, they were so impressed by the fact that I was that gutsy that I got an immediate promotion.
Interesting.
Yeah. And everyone was shocked by it. Me, most of all.
Right. Oh, interesting. Wow, that's a whole switch there. I'm in the soul connection space. I actually infuse soul intelligence into business.
Right.
And so your soul was like, oh, I'm traveling. Your travel soul was telling you, showing you, grabbing you, begging you, wanting to, yearning to travel. And then you didn't push her down over there, which is what most of us do. You didn't be like, stop, suppress, oppress, right? Layers over her. You said, oh, I'm traveling. You honored that soul yearning, which then they ended up honoring. It yielded unexpected returns.
Yeah, no question about it. And later on, I started my own business so that I could control my own schedule and travel when I wanted to, and as much as I wanted to, as much as I could afford to.
Yeah, exactly. So that now we're into a whole other space, which is my soul, your soul was so clear, and you were so tuned in to honor that. What you just said was, I started my own business so that I could travel when I wanted to, as much as I could afford to. So talk a little bit about your book, please. Tell us about the book. What are we going to experience with your book?
Okay. I refer to it as a travel memoir. It's a story of my life told through travel stories. And it's interesting because readers have told me, I go through the table of contents and I see a place that I know or a place that I've always wanted to go. And so I'll read that chapter first. Nobody reads it in order from what I can tell.
Okay.
But they read it. You can read it in bits and pieces. That's the way it was written. It's now chronological, but you can read it however you want. And it is really fun. I mean, people have said to me, I was talking to someone actually on another podcast, and he said to me, I started to read it so I would have a sense of, what the book is about. He said, I sat down, I read it cover to cover. He said, I absolutely loved it. People really have a good time reading it. They're fun stories. I think of myself as a very ordinary person doing some extraordinary things.
Oh, stop right there, woman. I love this. Again, there's confidence imbued in that, but there's passion and there's soul. It's when we allow our soul to rise that we can be what you just described, an ordinary person doing extraordinary things. So I love that you said that. That is clearly imbued into your stories. People say, I love reading them. It was so much fun. I read it cover to cover. And that is really what's happening here. And to the question that I ask every author is, why is your book worth my time? I'm so much loving your response, even though I didn't even ask that question yet, which is, my book will speak to your soul, really, because do you think in your experience, and especially in your work and your life experience, does it feel to you like a lot of people have a yen or a yearning to travel, if not only in their mind, then in actuality?
Absolutely. Even people who don't like to travel like to be armchair travelers.
What's an armchair traveler?
An armchair traveler is someone who really dislikes the discomfort of being somewhere that's unfamiliar to them. And I know any number of people like that. And some of those people have said to me, I loved your book because I felt like I was with you.
Yes.
Traveling, and I never had to leave my chair.
I see. Okay. Yes. I get that. And I felt like I was traveling and I never had to leave my chair. So people have fear, but they also have restrictions. They have health concerns, they have financial concerns, they have time concerns, they have space concerns. There's a lot of reasons that people can't travel. And so here you are with your special skill, intuitive skill in writing, which comes out in this book. You're actually giving them, again, even though you and I didn't plan that, I didn't find that on your website in my introduction. I said, because I know the research of how the imagination can stoke action. The idea that they could be sitting there reading your book and feeling like they travel, like they're traveling. I really love this.
Yeah, and the interesting piece is some of them got so inspired they actually took a trip.
Yes.
And one of the things that I really love is I have a Facebook author page, and I communicate with a lot of people on social media, on LinkedIn, and people who I do not know at all. I mean, never met them, never had a conversation with them, have written to me to say, I was reading, a chapter in your book, and I planned a trip there because I was so inspired by it. And one woman told me that she, for last year, for the holidays, had bought 12 copies of the book and given them to all of her friends.
Oh my God.
She said 3 of them have since taken trips, and they had not traveled since a year before COVID.
I honestly have chills. I honestly have chills. That is such good stuff. When I said that you have an intuitive writing skill, intuitive is a business word for me. My entire business system is called the intuitive business system. Right. I work mostly with women in the second half of life who have started businesses of their own, children grown and gone, and they're really in a space where it's my turn now, it's my time, and I want to, really settle into it. And so your book, oh my gosh, your book is one of those, resources that people can use for their own inspiration, as you're clearly getting story after story that it is. So I love everything about this.
Yeah. And I'm in the midst of writing the second travel book.
Okay.
Similar. And people have said to me, aren't you going to run out of stories? And I said, no, because when you travel as much as I do, and you're as curious as I am, you are constantly gathering new stories, or you're looking back on things that happened and going, that's a great story. Really interesting story. And things that are very tiny incidents sometimes make the most interesting stories. And
Share one interesting story from your book with us.
well, you'll love this one. I was out at the Devil's Tower, which is what's in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and which is one of my all-time favorite movies. And I decided I had to go out there. And I got out to the campground and discovered that I didn't need to use my tent. They had cabins. For $10, I was going to rent a cabin. Went to the cabin, and I'm just settling in, and I get a knock on my door. Well, it turns out to be two women who call themselves the cabin doctors. And they go from campsite to campsite repairing cabins. We ended up becoming friends. And I learned all about their lives. And if I thought I was passionate about travel, they took it to a whole different degree. They'd been doing it for years. They didn't have a home base. Their mother, had this was many years ago, had an answering machine and took messages for them. And they would call periodically and figure out what was going on. But they traveled from campsite to campsite, repairing cabins, meeting people, seeing places. They tried to be in national parks because they really loved it. And it was one of these encounters with people who I would never have met in a million years, who lived the most interesting lives. And so that's the story.
I love everything about this story, of course. There's so much to that story, none the least of which is you never would have met them if you weren't out and about with the lens on, right? You also have a filter, but you especially have a lens. So I recently relocated, and I have honestly created a new pair of glasses for myself. I am intentionally, actively, with commitment and spiritual backing, open to meeting new people and making new friends. And I slowed down my language, and I made a point of each one of those things because there are different ways to travel. You can travel without this, new pair of glasses, the way you're open, you understand that you're meeting people, the stories in your book, show this and share this. Or you can travel with, what do they call it? The blinders on, where you're still in your kind of closed space. And another reason your book is worth, my time and our time to read is the taking off of those blinders, the opening up of the spirit, and the wanderlust that you talk about.
Yeah.
And that's an example of what do you call it? Like a spiritual return, a gift back.
Yeah. And the other piece of it, I think, is that you have to be curious. I am curious about just about everything. And I was trained as a market researcher, so I know how to ask people questions and to get people to talk. I've gotten people to talk who in a million years would never have spoken with a stranger. But I look like a nice person, and I'm very calm. And I have gotten people all around the world to talk with me and really learn about you want to learn about the world. Don't read the newspaper. Go out into the world. It's a far better way. The politics and everything that everyone will tell you can scare you to pieces. You get to a place and you discover everybody wants the same thing. They want a nice life for their families. They want their children to do better than they do. And people are friendly. I think that's the thing. People are always afraid, it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be it's not.
Well, that's another piece of this, which is, I call this opening your essence. Again, everything I talk about is personally, but also in business. And so it's opening your essence that you said, I look like a nice person. I'm a nice person. Right. I keep it quiet. I'm open. But you have an essence that invites people in a way that's worked for you, that's safe for you, that's fun for you, that's amazing, that's produced, an incredible life and this wonderful book. And the next book we'll talk again when that's ready to come out. And that's what happens when you kind of get out. So I love so much that even for people who have those reasons not to travel, which are valid, not for me to say or not. They don't have time, they don't have money, they don't have a lot of things, all the don'ts. And you said, well, my mother took us to festivals in town, and you did what, took a job to, feed your passion of being able to travel. These are choices that we make. Again, I get just traveling across the country. I have some stories that I could share as well. And mine was not one of those fun stop and see all the things. It was an expedient trip from the Southwest to the East Coast. Right. And still in all, you get, you definitely, you get filled and infused with this fun and love of life. Now, let me ask you, the third question I ask is, what do you want people to do as a result of reading your book?
More than anything else, first to travel. And again, it doesn't have to be travel. It can be travel. To get out and explore, and really to be brave about things. I mean, as I said, ordinary person doing extraordinary things. But I want people to travel. I think reading the book, and I'm going to even hold it up and show you.
Yeah, please do.
Book. Whoa.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I love it.
And
I love the blue around indicating the sky.
Mm-hmm. Going the wrong direction here.
Yeah.
I really want people to read it and feel inspired to go out and see the world, and to take away some of that fear from being adventurous. And being adventurous can be, there are so many ways to be adventurous.
Right. It's not the definition that you have.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. As you know, we were just discussing, I jumped out of a plane last week. And in my little introduction to my jump in the video, I say I'm jumping out of my comfort zone into the confidence zone. In my discussion after the fact, in my daily live at 5, which I call In the Confidence Zone with Susan Axelrod, I said, you don't have to jump out of a plane. You can step across your threshold. It's the same thing. It's so important for people to understand. I'm so glad to speak with you. I'm so glad that you're sharing this. I'm so glad that you have this openness to, welcoming people into your, to your Facebook author page. We'll post that to invite them in to read and experience the stories of travel and wanderlust, and to really encourage them to find this little piece of brave themselves to be able to then step out. Why don't you share with us, how can people find you?
Well, I'm on just about every social media. I am on Twitter. I am on Facebook. I am on LinkedIn. I am on Instagram. I have a website that I highly encourage people to go to.
And what's the website?
KarenGershowitz.com.
Okay.
And if you get the book and read it, one of the things that you'll discover is I have a section that's called chapters. And you click on each chapter and it'll show you photographs, and I'm a good photographer, of what I was doing during what's described in the chapter. So you can see as well as read.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm I teach, and I know that everybody has different learning abilities. And so I always advocate that multimedia approach. Some people like to read, some people are visual, and it provides for a greater experience. Absolutely. We just have about 1 minute left. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm so excited about people buying your book. I want to share with listeners, viewers, or listeners to this podcast. This book would make a great gift for any seniors who are sitting at home and really can't travel any longer. I want to encourage you to start thinking about that now. Buy some copies for seniors buy it for their birthdays, buy it for the holidays, buy it for Mother's Day or Father's Day. Buy it for no reason, give it as a gift, because it will change their lives especially if they really can't travel any longer, it will give them the opportunity to experience travel and perhaps stoke and spark their own memories. Karen, would you agree?
Absolutely. But I also hope that they read the book and travel.
Yes, that too. Buy it for yourself, read the book and travel.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people from in their 20s up until their 80s. So, it's got pretty broad appeal in terms of the age range.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I want to say thank you so much. I'm so delighted to know you. Please let me know when your next book is coming out, and we will talk about that book as well here on your book, My Time.
It's been delightful. So thank you for having me as a guest.
It's my pleasure. I'll see you again soon.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye-bye.